Hi, I'm Stephanie Strange. Want to hear something scary?
Hello there, I hope you're excited as I am now that we have new videos on the first Tuesday of every month. And we're hoping that we can bring back the weekly videos very, very soon. In addition, I'll be doing email submissions from you guys and making videos out of them on the second week of the month. And I'll be doing monthly live streams again on the last week of every month. When there's not a new video, we'll be doing compilations from our incredible archive of the scariest stories from around the world, so we hope you enjoy.
Forestal was 18 when he was sent for 2 years of military service starting in 1982. He was dispatched to a border post along the defensive line between Bulgaria and Turkey. His job was border guard, and his main duty was to patrol the electrified border fence. Mostly, it was to make sure nobody left the country during a time of severe restriction of movement under the communist government. His orders were to shoot on sight. No exceptions. One night, he and his best friend Ivan were patrolling the border as usual with their dog. Ivan was a far senior soldier, much larger and stronger than Forestal, with a kind of look only veteran soldiers had. He described the night as still and cold, and the moon shone through the clear sky during the night. There was a light breeze that whistled faintly across the open plains between the two borders. All was well and normal, and their routine patrol was near their end. Much like most days, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and the two men started to make their way back to the camp. They were almost back to base when, all of a sudden, Ivan stopped. He turned his head to the darkness. "Do you hear that?" Forestal stopped to listen, and his eyes widened as he heard what sounded like singing. The two men listened and listened as the singing continued and seemingly became louder. Forestal stood still, yearning to know who was singing so beautifully. Then, their dog started to growl, softly at first, until it started barking furiously as the singing came closer and closer. Ivan grabbed Forestal. "Listen to me very carefully," he said. "I need you to run back to checkpoint B, get on the radio, and call for reinforcements. Tell them code siren. They'll know what you mean." "What? Why?" "Do as I say, do you understand?" "All this over some singing? This isn't the Turks or the Americans. This is much more serious than that. Now go!" By this time, the singing had become so loud it was almost unnerving, as if the source was as close as a few meters away. Forestal looked around in panic, gripping his rifle in fear and confusion. Forestal started to run. He knew that the checkpoint was less than a kilometer away and that he could make it there in a few minutes if he really ran for it. Behind him, he heard the barking and the growling of their dog change into whimpers and cries, which was followed by bursts of automatic fire that ripped through the night air. The fire sustained until he had finally reached the radio at the checkpoint. "Checkpoint B to base? Checkpoint B to base. We have a situation here. Code siren. I repeat, code siren. Requesting immediate reinforcements. Over." "Base to checkpoint B. Reinforcements are inbound. What is your status update? Over." As the response came, the gunfire continued, followed by a scream, as if from a young woman in pain. Forestal stood petrified, his hands trembling. I don't know. My comrade is currently engaging. I don't know what's going on." He shouted into the radio, desperately hoping for some help. A cracked response from the radio came. Forestal struggled to make out the words as the gunfire continued on in the distance. Then, a man's scream, and the gunfire stopped. Total silence, as the broken message of the radio became nothing but static. Forestal began to panic, wondering whether to help Ivan or to wait for reinforcements. He stood there and listened carefully, but nothing, only silence. Then suddenly, the singing. The most beautiful sound he's ever heard in his life. Forestal jumped, shouldering his rifle and aiming into the darkness. Frantically, he aimed his rifle in different directions as the singing grew louder and louder. His breathing became faster and disjointed. His heart pounded like a drum. The singing came closer and closer, filling his eardrums until nothing. Silence again. He looked around and listened, trying to see or hear anything he could. Then he saw it. A woman with blonde hair that glistened under the moonlight, wearing a white dress, stood no less than 300 meters in front of him. She was unbelievably beautiful. Basil flinched, bending down on one knee and aiming his rifle. The woman remained still, evidently not fazed by his threats. "Hey, you! Stop there or I'll shoot!" No response. He wondered, why would she be here? By herself, on the border? Was she a spy? Or a defector? Maybe I should go over there and talk to her. No! He re-aimed his rifle. Her eyes glowed in the shadows like a cat's in the night. The eerie yellow hue was both terrifying and alluring. Maybe she needs my help. "No!" He shouted at her. "Last chance! You surrender or you die!" Again, no response. He opened fire. A full magazine later, and the woman was lying on the floor, dead. He went to examine the corpse just as reinforcements turned up. But when he got up close, there was no body. No blood trails, no drag marks, nothing. Where did she go? Neither Ivan's nor the dog's bodies were ever found either. What was found were bullet casings and Ivan's rifle left in the mud. The next morning, Vasil told his mother about what had happened. She gave him a tight hug. "Do you realize how much danger you were in? You encountered a Samodiva." According to his mother, they are ancient Bulgarian nymphs that seduce men with their enticing singing voices. Once they lock them in a trance, they take them away as slaves and torture them to death. Had it not been for Ivan, you would not have lived to tell this tale. Oh, I'm so happy you're safe.
In a city by the sea in South America, there was a grand white house atop a hill, and below it, a small town was nestled in its shadow. One evening, two teens decided to break into it. "Did you know this place was owned by rich war criminals after World War II?" Galen said to his best friend Leo. After exploring several abandoned places, they decided to scavenge for things they could fix up and sell online. Leo's family had recently fallen into hard times, and they hoped to bring in a little money by selling the old things they'd find. Still, the house gave Leo a strange feeling. Isn't it haunted? Didn't all the bad people who lived here die mysteriously? Galen was certain this house was their big score. So, it's filled with riches and treasures they brought with them and left behind. I bet we'll find something great. Pulling the chains off the tall, rusty gate, the boys realized it was unlocked. With a loud creak, the gate swung open. Leo gave a big sigh and shifted in his old shoes. They were falling apart at the soles. He felt like someone was watching him on the doorstep. But Galen pushed him forward. "Come on, don't be afraid," he said as he turned the knob on the door, and with a click, it opened. Leo followed. "I can't be late. My mom asked me to grab firewood on my way home." Just then, he heard steps from the staircase and looked up to see a dark figure. It was shaped like a tall military soldier. It stared at him with bright eyes. In a ghostly voice, it whispered, "Take only what you need." Leo squinted his eyes. The soldier's face was disfigured. Then the ghost disappeared. Leo shook his head, thinking he must have imagined it. He ran ahead to catch up with his friend, past the peeling wallpaper of the halls, stained suspiciously by rotting holes. Galen didn't seem to notice. Leo followed him into a drawing room that looked untouched by time. Galen was in a daze, fixated on the objects in the office. On the fireplace mantel, he saw a shining silver watch beside a row of jewels and signet rings. "We're gonna be rich," Galen said. Leo looked around. "Someone definitely lives here. We should go." And that's when he saw a pair of new shoes perched on a box. They were old, like something out of the 1940s, but yet new. He cautiously approached them. "They're my size." He held them up. A creaking sound came from the doorway. Leo spun around and caught the ghostly apparition of a woman wrapped in wilting scarves, her eyes hollowed out. Heed my warning. Take only what you need. Leo opened his mouth to scream, but then the ghost was gone. He turned to Galen, who was enraptured by the jewelry. Something was off about this place. They should leave, he thought. Leo noticed a pile of wool blankets, like the ones his mother wanted. Leo paused. Wait, I think I should take these instead. They keep my family warm. Galen had a realization. If we took all this jewelry, we'd have so much more to buy all the things we need and could ever want. He grabbed the watch and piled up the jewels. Leo gasped, "Wait, don't!" he shouted at his friend. And then a necklace chain wrapped around Galen's neck, and an unseen force began to strangle him. Leo jumped to help Galen, but something began to pull him back. The walls began to shake and bloody words appeared over them.
Take only what you need.
Suddenly, ghostly hands appeared out of the chimney and clutched Galen. Leo couldn't hold on to him for long. "No!" he screamed as his friend's body was dragged into the walls of the house. A voice boomed.
Take only what you need.
Leo grabbed the blankets and made a run for it through the shaking hallways. The door slammed behind him on the way out. He looked back, and in the window above him, he saw the soldier, the woman, and Galen looking down at him. The house had allowed Leo to take what he needed, but it would always take the soul it wanted. When I was little, my dad loved telling me unbelievable stories, but there was one that he waited to tell me until I was ready, whatever that meant. As always, I was skeptical. The story began on the USS Forestal, an aircraft carrier for the US Navy, where my dad was stationed in the 1970s. Dad worked night shifts, and along with his best friend, Bruce, took turns making supply runs deep below deck. Most of my dad's runs were to the supply room, a dark, cluttered space where no other crew members ever went. One night, my dad had just entered the supply room when, from the corner of his eye, he saw a man watching him from across the room. Dad turned, but the man was gone. Shaken, Dad grabbed the part he needed and hurried back on deck. He kept what he'd seen to himself, chalking it up to lack of sleep. But that first sighting was only the beginning. Another night, in a different area of the ship, my dad had to travel down an extremely long hallway, so long that it took 15 minutes to go from one side to the other. 5 minutes in, my dad began to smell smoke. He couldn't see any in the air, but the stench was bad enough to make him start coughing. Then he heard a terrible sound. A frantic, choking man was running up to him from down the hall, gasping for air. My dad ran for him and saw that the man's white t-shirt was covered in sweat, his eyes sunken in, his mouth toothless and wrinkled. The man reached for my dad's shoulder, but instead of grabbing it, he passed right through my dad's body. By the time Dad turned around, the man had vanished. Now, Dad really wanted to tell someone what he'd seen, but back on deck, he stayed quiet while Bruce made small talk. Navy men weren't known for being honest about their emotions, Dad explained, especially if it involved fear. Over the months that followed, he continued to have the creepiest encounters, like hearing laughter in the mess hall after hours, seeing boxes tip over on their own in the supply room, and smelling the same odd smell of smoke in the hallway. Some nights, Dad said, Bruce looked stressed like he was seeing the same things too, but still, for fear of sounding crazy, Dad kept it all to himself. Until one night, just before his tour was about to end. While bringing an engine part up to the deck with Bruce, the two saw 4 fellow sailors ablaze, leaping into the ocean. Without a word, they sprang into action and jumped overboard after the men. My dad swam to the nearest sailor. He reached out, expecting to feel the heat from the burned man's hand, but instead, it felt like a block of ice. The sailor barely looked human. His charred skin had all but melted off. He gripped my dad's forearm for just an instant before swell washed over them and the sailor was gone. Searchlights beamed down, rafts hit the water, and my dad and Bruce were rescued. No other sailors were found. The story ended with what Bruce said to my dad. Those men weren't alive, were they? No, Dad replied. I saw something like this before, but I was afraid to ask you about it, he admitted. Same here, Bruce replied. Dad said from then on, when he sees something, he speaks up about it no matter what others might think. As for me, I got Dad's message, but I still didn't believe his story. Until, as a freshman in high school, I learned that in 1967 there had been a huge fire on the USS Forestal. The flames burned for hours, killing 134 crew members, a number of whom died in that long hallway, while several others choked to death from smoke in the supply room. 4 men had also caught fire and jumped overboard. It looks like Dad hadn't made it up, after all.
This is going to be the craziest summer I've ever had, so I need to make sure I'm taking care of myself on these long, hot days. Personally, the first thing I do every morning to make sure I can take on the day is get hydrated as soon as I wake up. With all the drinks out there, you want hydration that works. Liquid IV delivers extraordinary hydration with advanced science thanks to Live Hydra Science, an optimized ratio of electrolytes, vitamins, and nutrients. It's super simple. Just tear a pack open and pour it into a glass of water. My current go-to flavor is strawberry lemonade, and it's really good, y'all. Turn your ordinary water into extraordinary hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code SCARY at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop for better hydration today using promo code SCARY at liquidiv.com.
Thanks so much for listening. Like and share if this video gave you the chills. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell for notifications. See you next time.